I know this is hard for you, but at least I got you to laugh. I love it when you laugh.
When we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Together and Apart, summer 1943. Here are Linda Ellerby and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
Tonight, we're going halfway back to the turn of the century, to a terrible time, a nasty time, but a time that gave us good memories because we came through it.
Welcome to our world. It is the summer of 1943. We're at war, the Second World War, but that is over there. Here, we are pulling together, urged on by a government that needs our unity to produce the men and machines of war. The act of pulling together is supposed to stitch up tears made by racial, social, sexual, and economic inequality in America. Instead, the stitches begin to unravel even faster. Together and divided, we stand.
By June of 1943, the Allies had cleaned the Germans out of North Africa, were about to launch the invasion of Sicily, and were taking the offensive against the Japanese in the Pacific. There really was a light at the end of the tunnel. But the tunnel was long and dark and filled with mines, and it would take more than 2 years to reach the light. Of the 8 great powers that fought World War II, the United States was the only one that was not a battleground. While Americans were fighting and dying on foreign soil, American soil had become another kind of war theater. We called it the home front.
Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, growing reveille. He's a boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B.
Think of it as a kind of twilight state. Real life is on hold, war is the business at hand, and in America, business is booming. The fighting is over there, not here, but the newsreels bring the war back home, make it personal, make soldiers of us all. We resemble one of those big families where everybody yells at everybody until the day somebody outside the family tries it. Then you better duck.
We've had another week of air war, the greatest air war that the world has yet seen, and its scale is still increasing.
Most of us have got some member of the family in the fighting forces of the United States. And we back home are trying to do our bit too.
The company jumps and he plays reveille. He's a boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B.
Even music celebrated war and warriors. Maxine Andrews of the Andrews Sisters.
It was like almost having a big love affair or a big love-in. And you would always get the feeling that people were standing and holding hands, encircling the whole country. There was a marvelous, marvelous kind of unity.
Tall man with the high hat will be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, any bonds today? Any bonds today? Any bonds today?
Well, this raised the sale of American bonds sky high.
War bonds. Every movie star from Bugs Bunny on down said we ought to invest in the war, so we did. We bought $135 billion worth. 1875 bought a $25 bond, 25 cents bought a defense stamp. If you didn't have a quarter, there was one that cost only a dime. We were patriots down to our pocket money.
Here comes the freedom man.
Can't make tomorrow's plan.
Not unless you buy a share of freedom today. Any stamps, any bonds today.
That's all, folks.
War posters. The Office of War Information made sure we could tell the bad guys from the good guys. That too was supposed to inspire us and unite us. Propaganda for principle and production. Take rubber, not your average symbol of patriotism, but in 1943 rubber counted because the U.S. bought most of the rubber it used from countries controlled by Japan. America needed rubber, so Americans gave what rubber they had, including their girdles. The president told them to.
One thing you can be sure. We are going to see to it that there's enough rubber to build the planes to bomb Tokyo and Berlin. Enough rubber to build the tanks to crush the enemy wherever we may find him. Enough rubber to win this war.
It was a time of consumer patriotism. Save newspapers, save scraps, save America. And gas. There must be enough gas to power the engines of war, so we accommodated. We rationed. We bussed. We trained. We improvised. What else?
Well, let's face it, there was a lot of cheating going on because guys would come up to you real close and they'd say, hey, cutie, would you like to buy some stamps for, mostly gas?
Forget nylons and silk stockings. Women wore socks or went bare-legged. Ready-made cigarettes went to the servicemen. The home front smoked pipes or tackled the mechanics of rolling their own. Food rationing was an attempt to distribute scarce goods fairly, and most of us cooperated. But it was a bureaucratic nightmare that curbed but did not eliminate hoarding and the black market.
In addition to the blue stamps, you will use the red stamps for meat, cheese, butter, and fats. These red stamps mean a fair share for everyone. When you use them, you are helping to stamp out the black market.
One answer to the food shortage was to grow your own. In the summer of '43, 20 million families pitched in with victory gardens to produce 40% of all the vegetables grown in America.
I gotta hand it to you, Junior. Those are certainly lovely-looking tomatoes you got there.
Well, they ought to be. I've been taking good care of them. I've been using only the very best fertilizer.
Fertilizer?
Well, certainly. What have you been using?
On my tomatoes,
Mostly at the state and local level. The town of Kent, Connecticut had a model program so efficient that its director, a high school math teacher, James Humphreys, was ready to take on the enemy.
Well, we thought we might be invaded. We really did. We wanted to be sure to know that we could still, on the corner of Numeral Rock, and set up our rifles there and shoot anybody that came along. We were really enthusiastic about taking care of Kent, Connecticut. The plane spotting was the most important thing. My wife and I used to walk from Kent School up the main road to where this observation post was. Somebody was always on the ball because a plane might come. And I hate to think of what would have happened if the Germans or the Russians had gotten over here. Oh.
The big new movie in the summer of 1943 was This Is the Army. It was based on Irving Berlin's Broadway show of the year before and featured 350 real GIs.
They asked us lots of questions. They jabbed us in the arm. We stood there at attention, our faces turning red. The sergeant looked us over, and this is what he said.
This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephone. You had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore.
This is the Army, Mr. Brown. You and your lady went to town. She had you worried, but this is war, and she won't worry you anymore. No, she won't worry you
By that summer, they were drafting 18-year-olds. Young grocery clerks, laborers, boys fresh out of high school were sent off to some jungle or desert and told to win a war.
He's not so handsome, he's not very tall, and in the smart set, he's nothing at all. He was the first one to answer the call, that soldier of mine. Oh, there at the station, I tried not to cry. I kept on smiling while waving goodbye. I know he'll come back, that wonderful guy, that soldier of mine.
See these two blue stars? You put a blue star in the window if you had a son in the armed forces. If he were killed, the star was gold. They did it for daughters, too, and plenty of daughters were killed in World War II. Plenty of black Americans were killed also. Maybe their mothers got separate but equal gold stars. Come back to the summer of 1943. Come back to the fight for freedom, this time in Detroit.
Our World will be right back. Together and Apart, summer 1943.
Think small. New burger bundles. Mini hamburgers from Burger King. New burger bundles. Look, Ma. No hands. Burger King, the best food for fast times.
Ford Taurus, America's award winner, is now at even better value. With 3.9% financing or cash back, plus option package discounts, you can save up to $1,100. Taurus, a design leader with exceptional value.
I'm wearing absolutely nothing on my eyes. Nothing but Almay color. Eyeshadows and eyeliners from smoky to bright. Rich mascaras. All hypoallergenic and fragrance-free. Almay. Everything you want and nothing you don't.
Still no word.
Recently, 10 best-selling latex paints were brought together in an independent test to take the guesswork out of finding a quality flat wall paint.
Hot, huh?
Each was tested on the toughest measurement of all, scrub resistance. The winner?
Glidden Spread Satin. Thank you very much.
New improved Glidden Spread Satin. It outscrubbed them all, and it's on sale now.
Doc, who came in second?
Does it really matter?
Glidden. Your paint should be this good.
Runny nose, watery eyes, congestion, and a headache. When you've got all these sinus symptoms all together, you've got sinus complex. And that's too complex a problem for most cold or sinus remedies. You need maximum strength Sinutab, specially developed to relieve all the symptoms of sinus complex. Sinutab, you'll feel altogether better. And take new Sinutab nighttime at night to feel altogether better in the morning.
On the Disney Sunday movie, look out 007, because here comes Jason Starr. I'm a veterinarian! He's a double agent, Sunday.
Welcome back to the summer of 1943. Most of us bore up under the hardships of rationing, committing no sin worse than griping about it. 12 points from your red stamps for a porterhouse steak, it said. Try to find a porterhouse steak, or a hamburger for that matter. My father qualified for a B card. He was an insurance salesman, so gas rationing was no problem in our house. Nylon stockings were gone for the duration, replaced occasionally by liquid leg makeup, painted legs. Being 13, I considered that an improvement. But if you had $5, you could buy a pair of nylons on the black market. Money could buy you anything. About 25% of all retail business was black market business. So, all of us were not pulling together all the time, and some of us were pulled apart.
If we were fighting for truth, justice, and the American way, then it must be pointed out that racial intolerance also was part of the American way that summer of 1943. Imagine, if you will, a red cross that classified its blood into colored and white. Imagine a sign reading colored bomb shelter. That is the way we were, which is why the time was so ripe for a riot. The riot would come. It would be ushered down the aisle by an America that told its black people to swallow their racial grievances and lay down their lives for their country, but lay them down separately. On the surface, Americans seemed to stand united during the war. The truth was, we still lived and fought apart.
Legions of colored troops, dramatic living symbols of America's solidarity, America's unity of purpose.
Yes, the forces that fought for freedom were segregated. But so was society, especially the South. And so more black people moved north, hoping to find jobs in defense plants. They got jobs in factories like Ford's Willow Run bomber plant outside Detroit. By the middle of 1943, 50,000 blacks had moved to Detroit. But the housing, well, these prefab units weren't much to look at, and there weren't enough of them. And blacks weren't welcome. Not surprisingly, the blacks were boxed into the slums of Detroit. Ironically, the name of this particular ghetto was Paradise Valley. Something had to happen. Something did.
June 20th, 1943 was a hot, muggy Sunday. 100,000 people were jammed onto Belle Isle, a big recreational park in the Detroit River. About 10:30 that night, on this bridge connecting Belle Isle with the city, fights broke out between blacks and whites. Nobody knows how they started. They do know that rumors amplified those fights into one of the worst race riots in this country's history. It was said that blacks had raped and killed a white woman. It was said that whites had killed a black woman and her baby and thrown the bodies into the river. None of that happened. What did happen was 24 hours of terror and madness that left 34 people dead. The initial rioting was in Paradise Valley, where blacks ran amok, looting and burning businesses owned by whites. By the early morning hours, whites were retaliating, running in gangs, capturing and beating any blacks they found. The Detroit police force, nearly 99% white, was overwhelmed. Raymond Miller was a detective at the time.
I'm one person who was right out there during this worst race riot, in my opinion, in American history. We had instructions that day not to shoot, not to kill anybody unless we had to. The mayor at that time and the police commissioner were very considerate. They didn't want anybody killed. And as a police officer, I didn't think much of it. My friends didn't think much of it. I think that they were just felt like they were being held back, stopped, hindered from going in there and breaking up the riot. It was so violent that it was not safe for anyone to be on the street.
Moses Fritz was a funeral director in Detroit.
Anytime a white would be caught in the area, why, a group of these thugs would grab him and beat the dickens out of him. So I saw one fellow across the street, they had taken a beer bottle, smashed it, and with that cut bottle, it just, oh my Lord, it was awful to what they did to his face. And here he was coming with blood just streaming everywhere. It was a pitiful thing to see. But now that was in the colored end of the neighborhood. If you happened to go across Woodward Avenue, dividing between east and west, well, the Negro was caught over there, the whites did the same thing to him. So it was no man's land over here for blacks, and over that was whites. And one should not pass into the other's district.
The pure hatred of it all shocked policeman Vincent Piersanti.
My feeling is that that was really a race riot. It was based solely on race, not on what you had or what you did not have. It was race against race. White gangs and small groups of young white men would roam the streets looking for a black to savage in some way or another.
Julian Witherspoon, a student, was savaged by the police.
I made a statement that this is like Hitler's Germany. I didn't say it softly, you know. And you can't, walk a block, without, being stopped and searched. And there's no need, we're not coming from anywhere to indicate that we were plotting, any wrongdoing or anything of that sort. And I walked into the why, this is Young Men's Christian Association, mind you. So anyhow, this trooper shoots through the door, and it caught me in the side and the back here.
Everybody was in a combat mode, and combat mode doesn't lend itself to cool thinking and deliberate actions.
There was no provocation, there's no resistance.
Most of the 1,300 people who were arrested were black. Most of the dead and injured were black. 17 blacks were reported killed by the police. After the riot, the NAACP collected affidavits which charged that the police had stood aside and let the white rioters have their way. Gloucester Current was head of the Detroit chapter.
In Detroit at the time, the police and the black community had no love for each other. So it was not difficult for the police to forget their sworn duty. And at times, and in some instances, as the affidavits will show, they became almost a part of the mob itself. They did not provide the protection that isolated blacks should have had on a streetcar or in cars. There were a number of cars that were burned and with police standing around.
And it just kept getting bad and getting worse. And finally, the regular army was brought in, and they came in with big tanks and with big trucks with guns mounted on them. And I remember that they were tall, lanky, long, red-whiskered Texans, and they were not there to fool around. They let me at them.
They were all over the city. They were constantly riding. You'd see one pass you every so often. Any incident out of ordinary, they would investigate it, and they kept the police in line. They were on strict orders from the governor to keep order and restore order, and they did. So it was a godsend. If that hadn't happened, we could talk about real bloodshed.
The final toll was 25 blacks and 9 whites killed, more than 700 people wounded or injured. Property damage was put at $2 million. The rioting essentially was over in 24 hours, but it planted lasting questions in the minds of thoughtful men.
You just got a feeling that, what place do I have? Where am I? Who am I? And you had always been taught, I'd been in church all my life, that God was a fair God, just God. But I thought maybe he'd just gone to sleep. And while he's asleep, all this is happening, because he was the fair God that I'd been taught he was. He wouldn't let one segment of the population misuse the other as we were being misused. Now, that came out of it to me.
Blacks and whites could bear arms in a common cause and work together in war plants. But when old hatreds bubbled up, that unity of purpose was blown apart. Come back to the summer of '43, to the power of this country's industrial machine and the shameful exclusion of Japanese Americans.
Our world continues, together and apart. Summer 1943.
Dear Linda,
hope you can make my concert tonight. Love, Michael.
Nothing less than finesse.
Tonight, your hair has to look its best, and it will. You use Finesse. Finesse Conditioner. The perfect conditioning whether your hair needs a little or a lot.
Nothing less than finesse.
She curls around my feet, she wags her tail, lets out little meows, and hangs around the kitchen a lot. They go wild when I turn on the can opener, and they know then that I'm opening the can of Cal-Can. It has a real nice beefy texture. It's something that the cats can sink their teeth into. It's juicy, it's meaty. There's not a speck left when they're through. They love the Cal-Can, I love the cats, and so that's what I feed them.
See if your cat prefers Cal-Can.
I'm not going to take the blame for this. I've been a switchboard operator for 14 years, thank you very much. And just because someone at the top brings in a new phone system that's so complicated that no one can operate it, well, that's not my fault. Just to transfer a call, I've got to start 3, then 7, then push 3 of those feature buttons. And even then, I get the wrong person. It's ridiculous. It doesn't take a genius to know that a phone system that's causing all that trouble is losing you money. If you ask me, they should just scratch the whole system and cut their losses before it's too late.
Saturday. Starman lands on his new day and time at 8, 7 Central. Then, a runaway's last chance.
I don't allow people who try to harm children to just do that.
Pat Morita is O'Hara, and it's either kill...
Why should I trust you?
...or be killed.
Because we're alike.
Spencer for hire. After Starman and O'Hara.
Saturday.
Think small. New burger bundles. Mini hamburgers from Burger King. New burger bundles. Look, Ma. No hands. Burger King, the best food for fast times.
Since Harold Washington has been mayor, city taxes in Chicago have gone up almost $11,000 an hour. Why? The city of Chicago is owed over $200 million in uncollected taxes and fines. But instead of collecting taxes from people who don't pay, Harold Washington has been raising the taxes of people who do. When Ed Verdoliak is mayor, he'll collect the money owed to Chicago. 4 more years of Harold Washington? We can't afford him.
Verdoliak says put up or shut up on new mob charges at 10.
Welcome back to our world. It is summer 1943. We're fighting 2 wars, over there and back here, the home front. There's a tendency to look with nostalgia on that summer. We were so together as a nation. We were bound by a common enemy. But the war that forced that togetherness only emphasized the apartness of a country that divided itself along racial, sexual, and economic lines. We were supposed to be something more. We said we were.
We had to make do with less that summer, but we had more to make do with. Almost anybody who could work did work. There was virtually no unemployment. Wages were at an all-time high, and there was plenty of overtime. Defense contracts were handed out on a cost-plus basis. the government guaranteeing the company's costs plus a handsome profit. The home front was humming.
I can say to you that we are getting ahead of our enemies in the battle of production.
We did it before and we can do it again, and we will do it again. We'll knock them over and then we'll get the guy in back of them. We did it before, we'll do it again.
In the summer of '43, 2/3 of all American industrial production was war production. 9 million people, 4 million of them workers, uprooted themselves and came together in the war plants. Humming around the clock, Henry J. Kaiser's shipyard in Richmond, California, turned out a new Liberty ship every 12 days. In 1943, more than 1,200 Liberty ships were built, faster than the enemy could sink them, and almost faster than we could pay for them. Uncle Sam needed ready money, and Donald Duck volunteered.
Are you a patriotic American? Eager to do your part? Then there's something important you can do. You won't get a medal for doing it. It may mean a sacrifice on your part. But it will be a vital help to your country in this hour of need. Shall I tell you what it is? Shall I? Your income tax. Yes, your income tax.
Your income tax, which had been paid in a lump sum once a year, was now withheld by your employer from every paycheck.
When they gave her a production need, she was as proud as a girl could be. There's something true about red, white, and blue, about Rosie, the Riveter.
America's women came to the aid of their country by going to work, millions of them. In 1943, they made up 1/3 of the workforce. War plants actively recruited women. And no, the pay wasn't equal, and no, it didn't last. But yes, it was a beginning, a big one. Janet Doyle worked at the Kaiser shipyard in Richmond, California.
I feel that that was the beginning of women's liberation movement. Maybe they didn't realize it at the time, but it was, because we showed that we could do a man's job, that there weren't that many differences. I know how the men felt. Here were all these young girls and women trying to do the same things they were doing. They really resented us invading their territory.
One company advertised if you can drive a car, you can run a machine. So they ran machines and welded, were ship fitters, electricians, boiler makers. They learned.
The first big adjustment for me was getting over my fear of electricity. I had to learn to weld overhead and have all these shower of molten metal go down into your collar. Even though you were wearing a leather jacket, snapped and everything, it would still get in there. And also you wore leather gauntlets, but the sparks, little tiny pieces of molten metal down into your arms. So I had to get used to that.
They got used to that, and then they got some pride. Vivian Ranieri.
We were really good, you know. We were good at what we did. We felt good about what we were doing, and we felt this special togetherness. And I remember how jaunty and proud and cute, even, I felt in my shipyard workers' clothes. And there was a special feeling, I think, among the women that we were part of this wonderful effort of building a ship, a beautiful ship, a raw hulk that became transformed into this beautiful, shining ship that then we would see go off the waves. It was a wonderful experience.
Try to see it as it was then. Try to see it as the opportunity it was for women. An opportunity that had not been offered to another group of American outsiders. On the West Coast, nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans were considered to be a security risk. They were stripped of their land, their possessions. They were moved inland to remote detention centers. Let's call these for what they were, prisoner of war camps. It was a disgraceful episode in American history, but in 1943, the quiet dignity of these people received attention from an unexpected source.
The landscape photographer Ansel Adams took his camera that summer to Manzanar, an internment camp in the desolate California desert. The result, a tribute to the Japanese Americans' courage and grace under stress. They certainly didn't resemble those twisted, evil creatures on the propaganda posters or the little yellow bellies who met the Cohens and the Kellys in one of the songs of the day. Wartime is no time for making fine distinctions. Loyal Americans were treated as enemies. One of them, Robert Motecki, was 10 years old that summer.
Worst of all, I think it was an emotional imprisonment that, even now as I think about it, digs up old scars. But I was 10. I remember the barracks were hot, dusty. Each family had a room, the barracks kind of furniture. There was little privacy. Bathing was communal. It was quite a shock. I don't think I, as a 10-year-old, ever questioned that I was an American. I couldn't quite understand why this massive punishment was being visited upon me, or my parents, or my family. I think it was May of '43, the summer of '43, that we left. We were allowed to leave because the government, the war effort, needed farm laborers. And the government had by then discovered that it was a big mistake, sending the Japanese to the camps. So they asked the Japanese to leave, would they leave, and join the war effort. My father wanted us to leave, even if we had to live in poverty, and we did. We got out of camp, we were bundled onto the back of a truck, taken to the railroad station. I remember leaving that camp, the gate, the barbed wire, and that's indelibly stuck in my head.
Japanese Americans were allowed to fight for their country. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team went through training that summer. They were all volunteers. But they were not above suspicion, and they had to fight Washington for the right to fight the enemy. One of the men who led that fight was Mike Masoka.
Some of us, and I was a spirit, I guess, insisted that we had to not just join the army, but to fight in combat. And we were willing to fight against the Japanese enemy. So one of the first things we decided was that we had to demonstrate our loyalty and taking past history as a lesson. We said that we had to prove on the field of battle with our own blood, if necessary, that we were just as American as any other group. And then from there on, we had intensive training. But even in training, we faced discrimination from our own army. Many of the American officers had the feeling that General DeWitt had about us. Our commanding general was responsible for our movement. He said, a Jap's a Jap. And the fact that you give him a piece of paper attesting to his citizenship doesn't mean anything. If we proved on the battlefield that our blood was just as red and our guts were just as red as any other American, then they would accept us. This is the way the GIs were. Once we proved ourselves to be as good or better than they, and they had to take their hats off to us, why, I think we were pretty well treated.
The 442nd helped liberate Europe, fighting mostly in the long, bloody Italian campaign. Their bravery and loyalty were never questioned again. One of their number was Robert Motecki's big brother, George.
When my brother went off to war, it had an enormous significance for all Japanese Americans. It did in my family. I think I felt then that the world could be different for me. That our family would somehow survive this awful experience. That my brother would come home alive, safe, that we would be together, that we could lick it.
I'm pleased to say that George Motecki did come home with a Purple Heart and battle stars, and he stayed there until he and his brother went to fight in Korea, and happily came home once more. Come back to the summer of 1943, a time for war, but also a time for love.
In a moment, our world continues, together and apart, summer 1943.
Gee, Da Vinci, you look wasted.
I've got to present the helicopter, the spiral staircase, and the parachute by 10 o'clock. I'll never get it together.
Lenny, relax. We'll make it look great with this Xerox desktop publisher. The workstation lets you create graphics and mix them with words. Then the laser printer prints everything out laser perfect.
Eat your heart out, Gutenberg.
Desktop publishing from Team Xerox. It brings out the genius in you.
One word distinguishes the American Express card from the others. Member. And membership has its privileges.
We lost our card, our cash.
Even our passport. You've come to the right place. I can help you.
Good. That's great. That was an easy sale.
No need to wrap it.
I think I can fix it, honey.
That's why I got buyer's assurance.
I left my prescription medicine at home.
Don't worry. Global Assist can help.
Soon the game Monopoly will come to life at McDonald's. Win a McDLT, Coca-Cola, $1 million. A Lincoln Town Car, Dream Home, Vacation, over $40 million in cash and prizes. It all starts March 27th.
Ford Tempo. For a limited time, you can get 3.9% financing. Plus, cash savings up to $1,558. Available on specially equipped Tempos. See your Ford dealer for details.
The behind-the-scenes battle to make Platoon, a vision of Vietnam the Pentagon wouldn't support.
If you want to deny the record, then go do Rambo.
Watch 2020.
Tonight.
Welcome back to the home front, 1943. It was hard to escape the war. Many of the songs were war songs. Many of the movies were war movies. The war bound us together and kept us apart. Bill Malden's unforgettable characters, Willie and Joe, at mail call. Joe, in a world of his own. Maybe he had no letter. Willie showing another GI a picture. My son, he says, 5 days old. Good-looking kid, ain't he? The unwilling listener has a letter of his own. Maybe it begins, Dear John. Malden didn't spell it out. He didn't have to.
Loneliness could be found on all fronts, and so we looked for escapes. The biggest musical hit on Broadway celebrated America's pioneer virtues. It also changed the American musical theater. It used songs to move the plot along. It used ballet to do the same thing. This musical did not remind us of the war. It reminded us that the land we belonged to was grand.
Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain.
People will say we're in love.
Chicks and ducks and geese better scurry when I take you out in the Surrey.
I'm just a girl who can't say no.
One of the stars of the original cast of Oklahoma, Celeste Holm.
Gosh, I'll never forget the opening night as long as I live. That moment when the show started, in dead silence, and nothing on the stage, no girls, no jumping around, nothing on the stage but Aunt Ella sitting there churning butter, and Curly's glorious voice was Alfred Drake's, suddenly singing from the wings. Oh, what a beautiful morning. And the audience just, they were spellbound right away.
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way.
Oklahoma's imaginative ballet sequences came from choreographer Agnes DeMille.
First of all, it was extremely good. It has a score that has never been surpassed. Every song in it is a hit. Brilliant lyrics. They don't make lyrics like that anymore.
But a little brown maverick is winking her eye.
I was having lunch at Sardi's with a reporter from the New York Times who this time wanted to interview me. And that was a brand new experience. And I was talking about things. He said, Mr. Mill, you don't realize what kind of a hit this is. I said, no, I've never had a hit. What kind is it? He said, well, it's the biggest hit in the 20th century.
Your hand feels so grand in mine. People will say we're in love.
What it really was was that people, it made them feel proud to be human. It made them rejoice in being members of the human race, and most particularly American, at a very particular moment, because we were fighting for our lives, and these young men were going out to be a part of that. And it reminded people of what the kind of unself-conscious courage that made this country.
It came at a time in the war and in the life of this country when they needed a statement about America that was wholesome, reaffirming, courageous, staunch, and good.
I left my heart at the stage door canteen.
If the most popular show on Broadway was the Stage Door Canteen, starring volunteers from the theater, it was because it was the only show where the audience could talk back, and the audience was very lonely. War separated people, and everybody knew that. Places like the Stage Door Canteen were for bringing people together. Even Macy's had a hostess corps. It was run by Mary Conovitt.
When I retired, I was sure I was going to write a book. And we were going to, I was going to have the title of We Fought Too. Because believe me, in our own way, we did. 1943 was, it was a busy year. It was right in the middle of everything. We had over 500 girls that we could call on. They tried to bring to these boys a home away from home and made them feel that somebody cared. They should have gotten some kind of an award because they were out 2-3 nights a week for years. They spent plenty of money. As far as morale goes, I think they did the best job that any organization could do. I was at the door most of the time, and I used to watch the couples going back and forth, and you could tell what a good time they were having, and you could almost sense some of them where a romance was going to come out of it.
At last, my love has come along.
Another romance, another goodbye. The recollections of some of the women left at home, read here by actress Elizabeth McGovern.
I guess I'm never really happy without my husband. Loneliness is the biggest problem, especially at night when my son is asleep. I feel so desperate. Sometimes I want to run out of the house and mingle with a crowd of people. I make myself stay in. I read, fix my hair, tub, make something for the following day, but I hate to go to bed. I postpone it till I'm almost dead from exhaustion. Writing to him helps me get away from feeling sorry for myself. Besides, thinking of what he has to go through is enough to make me thankful I am where I am. Waiting for the mail can make me terribly lonely, and I can hardly wait sometimes to hear from him. Well, I know I'm not the only girl in this position, and if others can manage to live through this mess, I guess I can too.
Light and gay, I'll
671,000 American servicemen came home wounded. Nearly 292,000 died in combat. Their blue stars became gold stars. Come back for the other legacies from the summer of '43.
Return to Together and Apart, summer 1943, when our world continues.
The problem with some conditioners is that they can make clean hair feel weighed down and dirty, but not anymore.
Introducing the newest salon secret from Germac, clean conditioning.
What a difference it makes, because now all Germax conditioners are actually formulated to leave your hair glossy, full, and really clean. So if you think conditioners leave buildup, try Germac's newest salon secrets for clean conditioning. They'll change your mind and the condition of your hair.
Where is the burning feeling?
Here.
For that heartburn, nobody does as much as Malox Plus. Where are the gas pains?
Here.
For that gas and indigestion, nobody does as much as Malox Plus. Dose for dose, Malox Plus neutralizes more acid, more than any leading product for antacid use, and it dissolves gas on contact. Where does it hurt?
It doesn't, thanks to Malox Plus.
Dose for dose, nobody does as much as Malox Plus.
Next, the unforgettable conclusion, an incredible close encounter on the season finale of the Colbys.
Is anyone there?
World War II changed America forever. Just as the war touched the lives of all Americans that summer of 1943, its effects continue to touch us today. The summer of '43, the home front. Here is its legacy.
The mass migration of civilians to war plants made us an ever more mobile people, willing and able to chase opportunity.
There's a star-spangled banner waving somewhere. That is where I want to live when I die.
If it took lives, it gave back money. War brought prosperity to the home front. War into the Depression, finally. As for productivity, we'd peaked. A decline would set in until one day we would, ironically, look to Germany and Japan for lessons in how to produce. Rosie the Riveter was the future, only Rosie and the rest of us didn't know it then. We thought she was a cultural hiccup and sent her home when the men came back to work. But it was too late. Rosie already knew what she could do. She could do what had to be done. And even if Rosie never went back to work, her daughter did. And her daughter did too.
Nothing came directly out of the Detroit race riot except damage, pain, and death. But it did alert people of goodwill of all races that blacks were treated as second-class citizens, even in the North. A wrong that would have to be righted before the law in the courts. Bigots of both colors had their day in Detroit in June of '43, and they didn't solve a thing. The Japanese Americans regained their place in American society, but they were never adequately compensated for their losses, and their cases are still before Congress and the courts. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team became the most highly decorated unit of its size in World War II.
The war? Well, we won the Second World War. It cost us only $317 billion and a total of 400,000 American lives. It has been called the Good War, the Perfect War, which is another way of saying it was a popular war. Hitler attacked human decency. Japan attacked us. One's duty was clear. Uniting was made easier. We had a purpose.
Drafted, getting drunk in Alabama, chasing girls in New York, dying on a beachhead in Europe. It was a profoundly lonely time. Every person had his own thoughts, his own fears. What the war effort did was let us bury that in a common purpose. It energized us, made doers of us all. It was not a good way to grow up, but it worked.
The summer of 43 is 43 years gone. Time to separate myth from truth. If the truth of that time included an extraordinary unity, it also included riots in Detroit, profiteering, the exploitation of women, and concentration camps for Japanese Americans. That's why there was a United States Office of Censorship. And that's why this office made rules that American movies couldn't be exported if they showed scenes of racial discrimination or Americans being unconscious of their obligations to their fellow men. The American myth had to be protected. It was a matter of national security. But the myth was a lie. Americans knew that then, and we ought not to forget it. Sure, we fought for liberty, but that didn't mean we had it, not all of us, not all the time. Liberty, like truth, was then and is now a piece of unfinished business. And so it goes. Also in the summer of 1943,
Joseph Connaughton, the censor of convicts mail at Sing Sing Prison for 26 years, retired.
Edward Noble, a millionaire candy maker, bought NBC's Blue Network and created the American Broadcasting Company.
Pennies were made of zinc-coated steel. Copper had gone to war.
In June, 534 divorce actions were filed in Reno, Nevada, the biggest month in the county's history.
In Las Vegas, pinup girl Betty Grable and bandleader Harry James were married.
Charlie Chaplin settled a paternity suit brought by an aspiring actress. 6 days later, he married Una O'Neill.
Henry Ford's only begotten son, Edsel, died.
The best-selling non-fiction book was One World by Wendell Willkie.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
For the Our World Viewer Guide, write to Community Relations, ABC, 1330 Avenue of the Americas, New York, New York, 10019.
Pernell Whitaker puts his undefeated record on the line when he meets Roger Mayweather in a live lightweight title bout. Plus, one of the most exciting title fights ever. For the first time on network television, the unforgettable Hagler-Hearns Championship Brawl on ABC's Wide World of Sports Saturday.
An ABC News business brief now from New York. Sander Van Oker.
Good evening. Conrail went public today in history's largest initial stock offering. Over 58 million shares worth $1.8 billion. It sold rapidly, trading more than 15 million shares, closing at $30.75. British Petroleum offered $70 a share for the 45% of Standard Oil it doesn't already own. Robert Anderson, Treasury Secretary in the Eisenhower administration,
Phil, where the hell?
Is this what you're looking for?